December 19th, 1944. 03:42 hours. Verdun, France. A motorcycle courier named Frank Anderson stood outside 3rd Army headquarters, watching his breath turn to ice in the air, about to receive orders that would send him into the most dangerous ride of the war. The German offensive had exploded 3 days earlier. 200,000 Wehrmacht troops smashing through the Ardennes in a blizzard of steel and fury. Entire American divisions were encircled, communication lines were severed, and somewhere in the chaos, General George S. Patton was about to attempt the impossible: pivot his entire 3rd Army 90 degrees north and counterattack in 48 hours. But there was a problem. Radios were failing in the sub-zero cold. Telephone lines were cut by German infiltrators dressed as American GIs, changing road signs and sowing chaos behind Allied lines. The only reliable way to get critical orders from Patton's headquarters to frontline commanders was flesh and blood. Men like Frank Anderson, dispatch riders who carried sealed orders in leather pouches, riding alone through enemy territory on motorcycles that could barely start in the frozen hell of the Ardennes winter. Anderson didn't know it yet, but in the next 7 days, he would ride over 600 miles through active combat zones, German ambushes, and whiteout blizzards to keep Patton's audacious counterattack alive. This is his forgotten story. Inside the chateau at Verdun, Patton had just made a promise that stunned even Eisenhower. "I can attack with 3 divisions on December 22nd, Patton had said at the emergency conference, his voice cutting through the disbelief of senior Allied commanders. 48 hours. 3 full divisions, the 4th Armored, the 26th Infantry, the 80th Infantry, comprising over 133,000 men, 11,000 vehicles, and countless tons of ammunition, fuel, and supplies, all had to disengage from active fighting along the Saar River, rotate 90 degrees north, and drive north through ice-choked roads to hit the southern flank of the German Bulge. It was logistically insane. But Patton's 3rd Army staff had been preparing for this exact scenario for weeks, anticipating a German attack even when others dismissed the warnings. Now those plans had to be executed with surgical precision, and that meant getting orders to 3rd Corps headquarters at Ardennes, 8th Corps command posts, and divisional CPs scattered across a 75-mile front. At 03:47 hours, Captain Raymond Schroeder, Patton's chief courier officer, handed Frank Anderson a sealed dispatch pouch. "Anderson, you're riding to 3rd Corps headquarters at Ardennes. General Milligan needs these attack orders by 0600. The main roads are compromised. Kampfgruppe Piper is operating behind our lines, and we've got reports of German commandos in American uniforms stopping convoys. You take the secondary route through Longuyon and Messancy. No stops, no deviations. If you're captured, destroy the documents." Anderson nodded, his jaw tight. He'd been a courier for 8 months, carrying everything from routine supply requests to classified intelligence. But this felt different. The weight of the leather pouch seemed heavier than usual. Outside, his Harley-Davidson WLA sat covered in frost, the engine cold as a tomb. He kick-started it 6 times before it coughed to life. Then, he rode into the darkness. The roads were death traps. Black ice coated every surface. The temperature had plunged to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Anderson's fingers, even inside leather gloves, went numb within 15 minutes. His goggles fogged constantly, forcing him to wipe them with freezing hands while trying to keep the motorcycle upright on roads slick as glass. But the cold wasn't the worst part. German Fallschirmjäger, paratroopers from Operation Stösser, had been dropped behind American lines with one mission: create chaos. Road signs had been turned around. Bridges were rigged with explosives. Snipers hid in tree lines, waiting for lone vehicles. At 04:28 hours, Anderson approached a checkpoint near Longuyon. Two American MPs stepped into the road, rifles raised. "Halt! Dismount and identify." Anderson killed the engine, his breath coming in ragged clouds. He reached for his dog tags. Serial number? 318-42756. Who won the World Series in 1943? Anderson's mind raced. This was anti-infiltration protocol. Questions only real Americans could answer. The problem was, Anderson had grown up in rural Montana and didn't follow baseball. I don't know. I don't watch baseball." The MPs exchanged glances. One stepped closer, rifle leveled at Anderson's chest. "What's the capital of Illinois?" "Springfield." "Who's Betty Grable?" "Movie star. Pinup girl." A long, terrible pause. Then the MP lowered his rifle. "Go, and keep your head down. We had a firefight here 2 hours ago. Krauts in our uniforms driving a captured jeep. We shot 3 of them before we figured it out." Anderson's hands shook as he restarted the bike. He rode faster. At 05:54 hours, 6 minutes ahead of schedule, Anderson roared into 3rd Corps headquarters at Ardennes. General Milligan's staff officers grabbed the dispatch pouch like it was oxygen. Inside were Patton's attack orders. 3rd Corps would lead the counterattack, with the 4th Armored Division spearheading the drive to Bastogne, where the 101st Airborne was surrounded and running out of ammunition. "Anderson, you're not done," a staff captain said, handing him a new pouch. "This goes to CCB, 4th Armored, at their forward assembly area near Habe-la-Neuve. Colonel Abrams needs his attack coordinates before dawn." Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, commander of Combat Command B, a hard-charging tank officer who would later become Army Chief of Staff, Anderson had delivered to Abrams before. The man was relentless, aggressive, and completely fearless. Anderson downed a cup of scalding coffee that burned his throat, then mounted up again. The sky was starting to lighten, a dangerous time. Daylight meant German fighter bombers, even in this weather. He rode east toward the sound of distant artillery. At 06:40 hours, the snow started. Not the gentle flurries of a Christmas card, but a howling white-blind blizzard that turned the world into a frozen shriek. Visibility dropped to 20 feet. The road disappeared beneath drifts. The motorcycle's engine began to sputter as ice formed in the carburetor. Anderson couldn't see, couldn't feel his feet, couldn't hear anything except the wind. He pulled over beneath a shattered tree, trying to clear the carburetor with frozen fingers. That's when he heard the voices. German voices. Through the snow, maybe 30 yards away, a squad of Wehrmacht infantry was moving parallel to the road, trudging south. They hadn't seen him yet. The blizzard worked both ways. Anderson's heart hammered. He had no weapon except a .45 pistol with 1 magazine. 8 rounds against a full squad. He waited, every second an eternity, watching their silhouettes blur through the snowfall. Then they were gone, swallowed by the white. Anderson kick-started the bike on the first try, a miracle, and rode like hell. At 0721 hours, Anderson reached the 4th Armored's forward assembly area. Sherman tanks sat in rows beneath camouflage netting, their crews working frantically to winterize engines and load ammunition. Everywhere, men moved with purpose. Mechanics, infantrymen, artillery crews, all preparing for the impossible push north. Colonel Abrams stood beside his command tank, studying a map spread across the hood of a jeep. Anderson handed him the dispatch pouch. Abrams tore it open, read quickly, then looked up with savage satisfaction. "We attack at 0600 tomorrow, straight up the Ardennes-Bastogne highway. No stops, no diversions. We're going to punch through to the 101st, and God help anything that gets in our way." He looked at Anderson.
You rode through that? Abrams gestured at the blizzard. Yes, sir. You got a name, courier? Anderson, sir. Frank Anderson. Abrams nodded. Well, Frank Anderson, you just helped save Bastogne. Now get back to HQ and tell Patton we're ready. The ride back should have been easier. Anderson knew the route now, knew which checkpoints were secure. But war doesn't grant favors. At 07:43 hours near Messancy, Anderson heard the shriek of incoming artillery. German 88s firing blind into the storm, trying to disrupt American movements. The first shell hit 200 yards ahead, throwing up a geyser of frozen earth and shrapnel. Anderson gunned the throttle, the motorcycle sliding on ice as he swerved around a crater still smoking in the cold. Another shell, closer. The concussion wave nearly knocked him off the bike. He rode through the barrage, every nerve screaming, expecting the next round to vaporize him. Then he was clear, gasping, his ears ringing, his hands trembling so badly he could barely grip the handlebars. But he was alive, and the orders had been delivered. If you made it this far, you're the reason channels like ours can keep the past alive. Let me know where you're tuning in from. Drop a like and subscribe so these voices from history continue to be heard. For the next week, Frank Anderson rode without rest. He carried attack orders to the 26th Infantry Division as they pushed toward Wiltz. He delivered ammunition requests from the 80th Infantry Division as they fought house to house in Ettelbruck. He rode to 8th Corps headquarters with intelligence reports on German troop movements, navigating roads choked with refugees, burned-out vehicles, and the frozen bodies of soldiers from both sides. On December 22nd, Christmas Eve, the weather finally cleared. American fighter bombers filled the sky, hammering German positions. Supplies were airdropped to the 101st at Bastogne, and Patton's armor ground forward mile by bloody mile. On December 26th, at 1650 hours, lead elements of the 4th Armored Division, Creighton Abrams Combat Command B, broke through to Bastogne, ending the siege. Frank Anderson was there, delivering final coordination orders between 3rd Corps and the 101st. He watched Sherman tanks roll into the town, watched paratroopers and tankers embrace, watched hardened soldiers weep with relief. And he thought about the rides, the frozen roads, the near misses, the endless grinding miles through a winter war that tried to kill him 100 different ways. But the orders had gotten through. Patton's impossible counterattack had worked, and couriers like Frank Anderson were the invisible thread that held it all together. Frank Anderson never received a medal for those 7 days. Dispatch riders rarely did. Their work was too unglamorous, too routine-sounding to the staff officers who wrote commendations. Dispatch-delivered orders didn't have the ring of charged enemy position under fire or held the line against overwhelming odds. But without Anderson and the hundreds of other couriers who rode through the Battle of the Bulge, through blizzards and barrages, past infiltrators and ambushes, carrying the orders that synchronized the most complex military operation of the Western Front, Patton's counterattack would have collapsed into chaos. The Third Army's General Staff worked tirelessly, planning every movement with meticulous precision. But precision means nothing if the orders never reach the frontline commanders. And in the frozen hell of the Ardennes, when technology failed and communication broke down, it was men on motorcycles who saved the day. The Battle of the Bulge lasted till January 25, 1945. Almost 75,000 American casualties, the bloodiest battle in U.S. military history. German losses were catastrophic, hastening the collapse of the Third Reich. Patton called it his finest hour. McAuliffe's nuts became legend. The 101st Airborne earned immortal glory. But the couriers, they rode back into obscurity. Frank Anderson's story teaches us something war movies rarely show. that victory doesn't just belong to the generals who make bold decisions or the infantrymen who hold impossible positions. Victory belongs to the logistics sergeants who keep supply lines open, to the medics who carry wounded men through fire, to the mechanics who fix tanks in sub-zero cold, to the radio operators who stay at their posts when shells are falling, and to the couriers who ride alone through the dark, carrying pieces of paper that hold the difference between coordinated triumph and catastrophic failure. In an age of instant communication, we've forgotten how fragile information really is, how easily it can be disrupted, distorted, or destroyed, how much courage it took to be the message, to literally embody the orders that armies depended on, to carry them through enemy territory in your saddlebag, knowing that capture meant not just your death, but potentially the death of the soldiers who were counting on those orders. Frank Anderson rode over 600 miles in 7 days through one of the brutal battles in history. He was never famous. His name appears in no history books. No monuments bear his likeness. But on December 26, 1944, when Patton's tanks broke the siege of Bastogne and turned the tide of the Battle of the Bulge, Frank Anderson was there, not because he sought glory, but because someone had to carry the orders. Someone had to ride through hell to hold the line together. That's the weight couriers carried. That's the weight Frank Anderson bore. And that's why his forgotten story deserves to be remembered.